a listener production.
Hey, Sacha Barbour Gatt with you. Welcome to this Friday Arvo episode of The Briefing. Is Gen Z going to be the one historians skip when writing our history books? That's a theory getting a bit of traction online at the moment, as those born between 1995 and 2009 get attention for their questionable social media posts in recent weeks. You might have seen that creator going viral for dancing in front of a burning LA to Michael Jackson's Earth song. It's got millions of views and likes, but the comments have been critical of Gen Z for being the most unserious ever. So what does that mean? Is it true? And how will we remember this generation? Joining me now are The Briefing's resident Gen Zers, my Headlines co-host Chris Spyrou, and senior producer and The Weekend Briefing's Helen Smith. Guys, thank you. For starters, what do we mean when we say Gen Z is unserious?
I think it's just calling Gen Z unserious is kind of because it's the behaviour we're seeing online from Gen Z. And that behaviour, I think, in my opinion, is we just don't care anymore. We're fed up. It's almost like we're giving up because really most of the time, is it that serious? Like, is it really that serious? Probably not. And I think this TikTok that I found, it is based on an American view, but I think it gives a pretty universal message for the Western world. It explains like this tension that Gen Z is holding.
Gen Z is the first generation in America that has absolutely no purpose.
That could be because they went to school, graduated, COVID happened, so a lot of them graduated online on a random Wednesday afternoon. They couldn't find work because COVID messed everything up. And then once they did find a job, the economy was so messed up that they haven't been able to afford anything. So now they're working second jobs to work on the weekend. And of course there's no meaning to life because all they're doing is working. Meanwhile, they're being told by boomers, kids don't want to work these days. I don't know. That could be part of it.
Okay, so it feels like, am I right in saying that it feels a bit like well, it's all screwed up anyway, so who cares and why take it so seriously?
Yeah, and I know I've felt this before, particularly in Australia with the cost of living crisis and the idea of buying a property or buying a house. It almost feels like we're so screwed that we might as well just have fun, not take everything so seriously. And I think that rhetoric is echoed across so many different issues, whether that's the language we use in the workplace or the fashion we wear in the workplace. We're not so corporate anymore. And I think most importantly, though, it boils down to how we post online.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think for me, unserious is this way that captures this idea that we as a generation take the piss out of everything. There is nothing that's off limits when it comes to comedy. Our default is to rely on our humour. And for me, you could say that applies not just to Gen Z, but for me, I was kind of like, what is the research in this space? What have sociologists, figured out about our generation that can lend us to believe that maybe Gen Z is the most unserious? So what I'm going to do is let's just have a look through the history books very briefly, Sacha Barbour Gatt. I know you love taking a journey down memory lane. So I want to start looking at the boomers. The boomers, they've been labelled the workaholics. They love structure and discipline, but they are less likely to welcome change. Mm-hmm. When we talk about Gen X, they're the entrepreneurs. They're kind of the first generation to actively seek out a work-life balance. And while their views are more liberal to the boomers, so they care more about social issues, they're less inclined to speak up when they disagree with things. They're very much the go with the flow. They're not big on disruption. Mm-hmm. Generally. Generation Y, millennials, yourself, this is the question everything generation. The why is very important to a millennial. They're independent workers and thinkers. They are concerned about ethics and society, but they are idealists. So they struggle with problem solving and accepting and learning from their mistakes, but they are big on ideals. This is the way things should be. Mm-hmm. Gen Z, that's us. We are the most digitally literate generation. We're vocal about human rights, and we're also the most ambitious generation. We crave top percentiles in the things that we care about the most. But we have much lower attention spans, poorer mental health, bad work ethics, and interestingly, where these sociologists have landed is that we are the most cynical generation, so the most unserious generation. Why they think that is because they think we've learnt from Gen Y's idealism. You guys have these big ideas and these big hopes and aspirations, but we approach life with a bit more realism. So we look at them and we go, these are great, but also how probable and how realistic are these things? And also what drives our cynicism and skepticism is that we are the most ethnically diverse generation. And with that comes a strong lack of trust in institutions and authority figures. With that said, though, we are incredibly hyper aware that we exist in a system that rewards conformity. So we know that when we disrupt things, we are going to be met with a lot of criticism and a lot of hate. And it lends itself really to two ways of approaching life. So there's this defeatist attitude that Gen Z kind of have, as well as this defiance attitude, this attitude of defiance that we also have. When it comes to online posting, to your point, Helen, all these things lead to engagement. Engagement leads to money. Money leads to financial stability, which is a big driver of what we do, which, to your point, Helen, really paints a picture as to why we do the things that we do online.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. I talked about in the top of the show, the Michael Jackson's Earth song. LA is literally burning behind this dude. The wind. This annoyed me. I'm not going to lie, because I put myself in the position of, if that was my home, if that was the Black Summer bushfires from a couple of years ago, which I was directly impacted by, and someone was doing that in front of them, I wouldn't be happy. I'd be pretty upset. But we also saw it during Hurricane Milton last year. It happened in Sydney this week. There were big storms and people were doing the same thing. I think a little less serious, but same sort of idea. Look, the criticism is that, that Gen Z is being unserious and that equals insensitive. Would you agree?
No, I don't think it's insensitive. I see those things and I'm just like, it's funny, but I'm also coming from a critical thinking point, like what they're reacting to is like really messed up. Like it's just dark humor. It's dark comedy. It's been happening for years. Like dark humor is not new. It's just that now we have social media platforms that can reach millions of people in 30 seconds and that's what's being criticized. I also think these people are like in the storm. Chris pointed to this before. They're experiencing it as well. So it's kind of like, not they're right, but
a coping mechanism maybe?
Well, I've got here that it is a coping mechanism. And this is exactly what experts and psychologists have also said as well.
Yeah, I think for me, it's to that point of if you're a part of the community that's being affected, you kind of have every right to poke as much fun as you want at it. If this was someone from New York that's flown in for the day to make a TikTok and sit there and dance in front of the mountains, horrible. Yeah. I mean, that is awful.
That's the line.
Yeah, that is the line. We've drawn the line. But I think if you're part of the community being affected, that's, that's fine. I did, interestingly enough, on the back end of the Sydney storms and the content being made around that, I had a cousin who had a tree fall and demolish her garage. And she sent one of the TikToks to me and she said, my garage got absolutely destroyed and your generation is out here dancing like it's a step-up scene. And I take that point as well. And I also understand that, okay, there are mixed reactions to this. But I think in a general sense, the way that we younger people are reacting to this, we're not being as critical as other generations, if that makes any sense.
But I also think like people think it's funny until it's taken too far. There is a line when it comes to some situations, especially with people dying or war zones, that I think Gen Z do take pretty seriously when it's mass destruction of lives. But I also think when it comes to serious allegations, take Diddy, for example, that's an all-in. Like, because they're not poking fun at the victims. They're poking fun at the man. They're poking fun at like someone with lots of power and money. It's almost like eat the rich vibes. Gen Z love eat the rich vibes.
Well, I guess you could say the same about Luigi Mangione as well, which that was another conversation that actually shocked me a little bit. I was like, someone died. That was a father. That was a brother. That was a friend. And people are celebrating a accused killer. And yeah, I suppose it's that idea that it's a different mindset for Gen Z. Are there any other points where you think Gen Z is treating social media differently than other generations?
I think Gen Z clearly see that content creation and social media is a real viable source of income. And when we look at the content that's made in fires and storms and things like that, as bad as it is, they are the gold star when it comes to content. You have something that is visually engaging. You have something that is audibly engaging. You have something that also cuts through. And it cuts through because it's so shocking. Because you don't expect to see everyday people dancing in front of flames. That was something that Michael Jackson did in a film clip to make a creative point, to make an environmental point about the state of the earth.
But in the same way, isn't it doing that?
100% it is. But I think this is something that we haven't seen on TikTok. This isn't something that you've seen on your For You page. And I think in that way, that really speaks to how we are digital natives and we have this hyper awareness of social media algorithms and how to really garner the most attention and eyeballs on ourselves and the things that we make.
Okay.
And as you said, like, we did grow up on social media. The iPhone was only released in 2007. That's smack bang in the middle of Gen Z. So it's always been there. Or you were like 10 years old and you got an iPhone, you got a smartphone in your hand. So it's something that comes natural.
Does Gen Z's unseriousness also extend into politics? And we kind of touched on that a bit with the whole eat the rich vibe. But, you know, can we trust this generation? I mean, we're in a federal election year in Australia. Can we trust this generation to take the responsibility of voting for who leads us seriously when they're unserious?
That's a good question.
I think we can. I think we can trust Gen Z a lot. And I think coming up to this federal election in Australia, we're going to have more Gen Z and millennials outnumber baby boomers at the ballot box. So I think it's going to be really interesting and telling what those results are. And it will tell us, hey, do Gen Z actually vote more left? Are they more central? Because data has shown that female Gen Zs tend to vote more left, but then male Gen Zs are steering more to the right. But I think when it comes to politics, Gen Z are pretty serious about it because they get angry. They're out on the streets protesting climate change or Gaza or, you know, women's rights, domestic violence. They're there. But I also think it does take into question this kind of social righteousness that Gen Z have.
But doesn't that then make them serious? Because to me, that's serious.
It is serious, but they're also like making funny memes about something that's serious. So there's this weird blend of the two. You can be super serious when it comes to domestic violence, but then you can make a meme about Luigi being the people's princess when he literally murdered someone. So there is this fine line of values and morals that Gen Z have that can be quite confusing.
I would argue, Helen, sometimes with protests and stuff, those things are performative. Those are a great Instagram opportunity. It's great to put up a story on a Saturday protesting your rights.
I think
Ouch.
I disagree because protests are how women got votes.
Yeah.
Protests are how a lot of things changes in social society. If you're not protesting, social media is just amplifying the protest. It's amplifying the messages. And yeah, you could post something on your Insta story but not actually be actively doing anything about it. There's a bit of a conversation there, but you're still posting about it. You're still informing someone about it.
And to be fair, millennials led the charge in this with Coney 2012.
Yeah.
The firestorm that created and how many people felt that they were leading the charge and being righteous and making a change. I can see where the line is fine, where it's I'm going to a protest because I believe in this cause, but also look at me do it.
Yeah, I do want to taper off my initial thought is that I think we have a lot of silent supporters. And I think that's something that the US election proved to be true. We have a lot of people who are voting a political way and they're not going to show us on social media. And I think we need to be also very cautious that the narratives that we're seeing and the conversations that we're having online aren't necessarily a reflection of how people are going to vote come this federal election. You know, it may very well be that Peter Dutton is in power. It may very well be that young Australians are looking for a more conservative government. We have, you know, the party lines. We have Labor promising to build Australia's future. We have the Libs looking to get Australia back on track. Both of those are tapping into what Gen Z want. What we want is financial stability and a clear pathway to something. So when we talk about Gen Z being unserious, it's very much, I think, this performance online. I don't think it's fundamentally true to their characters.
Okay, that's an interesting point. Look, let's talk the workplace. I work with a few Gen Zs. You guys are among them, but also I work with other people who are in that generation who I think are quite different to you two, and who I think would be considered serious. Maybe they don't quite fit into the mold of Generation Z. Do you think that this label translates into the workplace? Are we seeing that play out in how Gen Z is interacting with peers at work?
I think it is, but I think it's purely because Gen Z are being misunderstood. It's this new lingo language. It's online stuff. It would have happened with millennials as well. They would have been like, what are you saying? Oh my God, OMG, LOL. Like
Ruffle.
that kind of stuff always happens. But I think Gen Z are just copying it because they're really being super vocal about, I'm leaving work at 5 p.m. I have my work-life balance. I'm putting up my barriers. I'm looking after my mental health. Because as we've seen, the data's shown, Gen Z struggle with mental health. It's really bad. And online presence and use is impacting that. But I also think there's been some great things online that have come out to poke fun at this. One of my favorite trends was how Gen Z treats higher ups. And this was the little quote in the TikTok. It's, when my Gen Z baby nurse tells the surgeon to hold on. I love that. And it just shows that, I'm going to respect you if you respect me. We should have equal respect in the workplace. And I think Gen Z is kind of just no, if you don't respect me, then why should I put on a show for you?
It's interesting because that's something that's definitely built on from prior generations. But what I found interesting about this and Gen Z in the workplace, I was doing a little bit of digging and I remembered a podcast that I listened to with actually a former colleague of ours, the former head of factual and drama here at Listener, Jen Goggins. She was speaking on a Future Women's podcast last year. And this is what she had to say about Gen Z and how they actually get their foot in the door into the workforce.
They are master marketers, master self-promoters. You think about, they have grown up their whole life on social media, curating their identity in snappy one-liners and photographs and videos. They are master storytellers, master self-promoters. They are going to absolutely nail everyone in a resume, nail everyone in presenting themselves going forward. They'll probably beat you out on a task as well because they're very good at getting things done.
To contextualize, she then went on to say, and that's why it's very important to do a culture check and to meet your Gen Z potential employees in real life to understand whether or not they can fit in the workplace with their little quirks and their little charms, because we're very good at presenting ourselves in a way. Like she said, the one-liners, that's a task. Shortening your identity to a bio in Instagram, that's hard to do. And I mean, we're talking about this now. It's ironing itself out. In 10 years' time, we're going to have the same issue again with Gen Alpha once they hit the workforce.
Yeah, that's exactly true, is that, like Helen said, with the millennials, it was Ruffle, LeMayo. What's all this lingo? Why are they shortening everything? And with Gen Z, it's like, oh my God, she's wearing an off-the-shoulder shirt at work. Why are they all wearing sneakers? What's going on? Yeah. Look, to finish, I think what I've taken away from this conversation is that the unserious label is a previous generation's misunderstanding of how Gen Z has started to deal with trauma and full-on things and serious shit is that they're part of it, they are exposed to it, and it's their coping mechanism to either make fun of it or to lighten the mood or to turn it into something that is content. So to finish, I want to ask you both quickly, do you think it's fair that Gen Z gets this reputation from the generations before it for being unserious, or do you wear it as a badge of honour?
I think it's a badge of honor because I'm like, oh, honey, are you that upset? Are you that sad by me? I'm having the time of my life. I'm working hard. Yes, you might think I'm unserious, but I'm giving you the results. It doesn't actually matter. To break it down to the core, there are more things to worry about.
Yeah, no, I don't have a soapbox to stand on like Helen, but I agree. I wear it as a badge of honor. I love being Gen Z, and yeah, long live unseriousness, I say.
Okay. Well, there you go. Is Gen Z unserious? Yeah, probably, but there's a good reason for it. Helen, Chris, thank you so much for having that conversation. Really interesting. And you heard there from The Briefing's Chris Spyrou and Helen Smith. And that is all for this episode. Thank you for listening. If you liked it, why not share it with someone you think might enjoy it too? I'm Sacha Barbour Gatt. See you next time.